I'm going to use my radio voice now. You ready? Welcome to another edition of Everyone Hates Cleveland.com. Okay, I sound like a vampire. Welcome to another edition of Everyone Hates Cleveland.com, the podcast. I am your host, Jim Pete, joined as always by my EHC brothers, Michael Hattery, Gage Will. Again, if you're getting to this podcast first, you got to pause that, man. That's not your right. All right. Welcome to another edition of Everyone Hates Cleveland.com, the podcast. I'm your host, Jim Pete, joined today by Michael Hattery, Gage Will. Again, another podcast. I'm not even going to try to segue into anything other than we're about to talk about the Cleveland Indians outfield. And if you go back in time to the past three positional previews, when we've gotten to the outfield, almost every single conversation has been exactly the same. The difference this year, there's a big difference this year. And it's not
even worse.
I mean, the past three seasons we've been ripping on Michael Brantley, and of course last year he went off, and I don't want to talk about him. He's not with us anymore. Although I guarantee you we are going to have a Michael Brantley podcast at some point this year. I don't know when it's going to be, but it's coming. And when it comes, you'll know it but that's for another day. Let's start off with left field. The Indians made the Carlos Santana three-way trade in December. In that trade, they bring over Jake Bauers. And while I, of course, went off on the Andy Diaz tangent for over a month, Jake Bauers is a player that all of us are fairly high on. My big question when we got him was whether or not he was actually going to play left field. And I think by default, that's where he ended up. So I'm going to start with Gage in this one, since he's dribbling a basketball. Gage, talk to me a little bit about Jake Bauers. Like, tell me something that should, like, what kind of upside are we talking about here?
I mean, baseline upside is there's a lot of power untapped in there. Huge walk rate, a guy with a ton of plate discipline. And he's just a really fun guy to trot out there in left field.
It's fun, isn't it? It's fun getting thrown off right in the middle, isn't it?
Anyway, let me jump on board the Jake Bauers train real quick. Only if, and it appears they're going to do this, and I'm really happy if they just shove him out there and say, just do it. Give him left field and let him make his mistakes out there and let him hit the ball. I'm just worried that they're going to go away. They're going to see him botch one play out there in left field early in April. He's not a bad defender from reports, and have this insane reaction and throw him over at DH because Hanley's not hitting. But anyway, Jake Bauers, there's power in there. And the most fun part is he knows how to pull the ball. And he's got that baseline walk rate to live off of.
Yeah, so, Mike, immediately you were high on Jake Bauers. You wanted him playing in left field. Talk to me about what you think Jake Bauers brings to this team. Gage talked a little bit about the potential for him getting yanked over to the DH, and we did talk about that when we talked about first base, about him potentially getting pulled out of that left field role. I mean, what's his upside in left field? And we can compare him to the guy who was there last year. I mean, we at WFNY last year and EHC prior to that, we were not very high on Michael Brantley as a fielder, and we did bring the ire of most of Indians Twitter to us, but Jake Bauers does seem to bring some upside beyond defensively, especially beyond Michael Brantley. I if you're talking about elite, like Brantley levels, like when he was the couple of years where he was definitely an elite player, what kind of upside does Jake Bauers have to you?
Yeah, I think when Gage talked earlier about like needing fundamentally solid players, fundamentally average or a tick above, like I think that's what Jake Bauers probably is, and the Indians really need that. I don't want to talk about the asinine way in which Terry Francona treated Yandy Diaz right now, but I did wanted to drop that in because it was incompetent. But I do want to say that like he's just far more athletic than Brantley was last year. Playing left field in Cleveland is pretty easy with Progressive being, with the wall in left field being particularly high. It allows you to shade in different ways. And I think he's going to be like a 5 to 10% above average league average bat. So average defense, slightly above average bat. That's an average to above player on a minimum salary, which is the sort of players the Indians need. And I think he's going to do that. So I think in that way, I guess I'm a little more confident in this outfield, in the floor of this outfield, than I probably was before the Bauers trade. So I guess I'm going to turn this around because Jim gets to drive all the time. I like to drive because, what are you going to do? So beyond Martin, Leonys Martin, I think we all can agree is a lock. And Gage will nod his head yes eventually. But I think we think he's like a lock for someone who deserves priority playing time. He's a starter level player. And I want to know rank from, highest priority to lowest priority: Jake Bauers, Jordan Luplow, Tyler Naquin, Oscar Mercado, Greg Allen, Bradley Zimmer. Am I forgetting anyone?
Greg Allen, you said, right?
Yeah.
You said Leonys, Tyler Naquin, Daniel Johnson, maybe throw in there.
Mercado.
Yeah, and I think you both would probably at least be waiting on him. But where do those guys fit in? How are you breaking down playing time? And is it based on platoon splits? Do you order playing time based on that, or do you just do it on who's a better baseball player?
Well, I think that the wild card here is, again, you got to be realistic. And I hate to say this is something we talk about with every position but shortstop and third base, but it's something we're going to talk about with every position but shortstop and third base. I mean, I think bringing up a guy like Oscar Mercado should be probably one of the top two priorities in the Indians outfield. That being said, is it going to happen? Probably not. So while I could say that's the number two I'd say Jake Bauers is probably the number one priority, making sure that what Gage mentioned, him potentially becoming the DH or maybe even sliding into the first base role at some point or another, shouldn't happen. Like, my priority is getting 145 to 150 starts for Jake Bauers in left field to see what he's got. My second priority would be to in April and May to find out if Greg Allen can perhaps have a slightly lower strikeout rate and a slightly higher walk rate. That would be my number two priority, so that if he turns out to be probably a 4 outfielder or 5 outfielder, which is maybe what he is, then you bring up a guy like Oscar Mercado in June or July, and then he becomes your number two priority. And this is nothing against Martin, who should be the starter right now. Maybe, but I think that, to me, those are the big numbers there. And I do think that right field has to be addressed in that. I do think that there's a platoon to be had there. I'm just not sure what that platoon is. We're starting off with Naquin there and Luplow. And I think that's interesting, except for the fact that I just don't think Tyler Naquin should be on the roster ever. So, I think that the third priority that I would, or I guess fourth priority I would have would be, if you're going to have Jordan Luplow up there, like, who are you going to platoon him with when you start heading into the playoffs? Or do you find a 4 or 5 guy who can just sort of shift from left to center to right? And they do have some guys that can possibly do that. I don't have any, I really don't have any interest in Bradley Zimmer right now, in that I think when he comes up, he's a guy who's got to spend an extended time in the minors, getting healthy, one. And then part two of that is, can he ever be a guy who doesn't strike out, 35% of the time, 35 to 40% of the time? So I guess priority one is Bauers. Priority two is figuring out if Mercado and Allen can be full-time guys up here. And then priority three is figuring out if there's a good platoon set for right field that doesn't include Tyler Naquin. Gage.
Yeah, I think you hit on it. The biggest thing for me is, let's not I think they view Naquin as a stopgap, little bridge to Carlos Gonzalez whenever he's ready. They didn't sign Cargo last week to release him Matt Joyce style. They signed him. The timing of that stuck out to me because that means they didn't like what they saw in Joyce, and they realized they needed somebody else to come in and face righties out there. I wish instead of using Naquin as that placeholder, I wish they would let Greg Allen burn every day. And you could do that by throwing Luplow out there against lefties, Allen and Wright against righties, and then having him shift over to center when there's a lefty on the mound because we know Leonis Martin doesn't hit lefties.
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, I think that there's an interesting kind of puzzle that you could put together in that outfield, again, sort of a flex outfield where you're moving guys around constantly. Yeah. They have guys that can do that. Shifting it back over to Mike, same question, but even more importantly, like what is to you maybe the two big questions that have to be answered in the outfield by, say, July to see if the Indians do have to make a move maybe to bring somebody in?
Yeah, I think the biggest that can't be definitively answered just has to be like, is Jake Bauers doing what we think Jake Bauers is going to do? I mean, and I think Jake Bauers could still get more long-term opportunities, but I think there's a sense to it which we want to just see that his floor is pretty safe. And we want to see that by the end of July, or else you have to be a lot more aggressive because you can't just piece right field together anymore. So I guess that would be the big question. So here's what we do. I think too often, which like I think all of us own like varying levels of shares in Greg Allen, varying level shares of Oscar Mercado, varying level of shares in Jake Bauers. So here's my take. You get to pick one of Jake Bauers, Oscar Mercado, Greg Allen, or Bradley Zimmer for the next 5 years. You get to take one. Which do you take?
Gage, you start.
Oh, you're going to flog me for it. I'll take Jake Bauers. I just think there's so much of that tool set that's already there. And while his ceiling might not be as high as the other guys, I think there's a solid above average player in there every day somewhere. And he's kind of already proven that he can walk at the big league level, but yes, scratch it. Let's forget this. I'm taking Alex Call.
Okay, so I mean, the low-hanging fruit here for me would be for me to say Greg Allen. I think defensive profile for him is higher than most people give him credit for. But I'm not going to say Greg Allen. I think that there are players in their careers that at some point something clicks for them, and for me, that player was Oscar Mercado. The move from shortstop to center field with St. Louis. And his development there, when you see him play, the fact that 2.5 years ago, this guy was a shortstop and never played in the outfield with any regularity speaks volumes to me, because the guy is a really stout defender in the outfield. And I think there's a ton of upside offensively. And he does seem to be the kind of a player that profiles to see improvement. I think that I'm not saying that based on spring, although the spring was a nice indicator that maybe he can stick long term. But I think he's a guy that maybe St. Louis didn't see the upside on because they have so many other good outfielders that the Indians could capitalize on. And I think there's a guy there that's got potential, 20 home run power, good base running, and outstanding elite defense. Wherever they decide to put him. I've seen him make great plays in right field and great plays in center field. I think this is a guy who can be a middle, that middle guy or that right field guy over the long haul. Greg Allen, I like him. I like him a lot. I'm not sure. I do like him in the role that Gage was talking about earlier. Maybe perhaps I'm fitting in a couple of different slots rather than a full-time slot. I think Mercado could be a full-time guy though. Mike, what about you?
Yeah, I would say for me, it's like Mercado, Bauers are really close for one. And then Allen's like not that far behind. And then Zimmer's in like Florida stealing melons from a grocery store. He's not even working in a grocery store.
He's stealing melons because he can't go out and get an orange off a tree. He's got to go to a grocery store and steal melons.
Hey man, he's
I
like
just hope he doesn't
massive. Do you
swing
know
and
how much
miss.
food it takes to keep that guy alive? He's like really tall and muscular. He's like 12,000 calories a day. He like doesn't eat the Michael Phelps diet. He just eats Michael Phelps.
Jesus.
But no, I don't know. I do think it's Mercado. I think it's Mercado. I like.
We've
I
gone from
like
cannibalism
Mercado the best.
to
And
Mercado.
Bowers is really close. I would pick Bowers tomorrow probably, and Mercado tonight, and then Mercado the night after. I like both those guys for different reasons. I think Mercado might have a higher ceiling, and I like Bowers' floor. So there we have it.
All right, so I guess we're going to wrap things up there. It's interesting that Bradley Zimmer, maybe not. I mean, people have read us for a while. It is interesting that Bradley Zimmer is barely on the radar, other than to turn him into a melon stealing cannibal.
Wait, is he a Cocoa
He's fast,
Beach melon
man.
stealer?
Might be the right market for him to succeed. He finally gets to use his speed because he never gets on base, so he's never going to use it in the big leagues. But in the melon market,
Is he more of a South Beach melon stealer or a Cocoa Beach melon stealer?
Well, you know, sometimes these things go cereal, so I don't know. All right, we're going to wrap up shop there. The last thing I want to say about this outfield is this. I mean, Mike, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think the Jake Bowers, Oscar Mercado, Greg Allen conversation, kind of a platoon in right field, it's all very interesting to me. I think the one common theme over the past 4 or 5 years with the Indians has been the fact that we always seem to have an outfield built with all of these interesting people who need to almost be peak guy versions of themselves for that outfield to maintain itself. And what frustrates me the most about the Indians is they seem to be putting people in positions where they have to maybe try to push a little bit. My fear for Bowers is that at some point this year, even if he starts off strong, is that perhaps he has to try to carry the offense a little bit in that outfield. And that's what I fear about the most. All right, we're going to wrap up shop there. Please make sure you check out everyonehatescleveland.com. Check out our website. And if you could, head over to our YouTube channel, subscribe there. Head over to iTunes. We're on everything, Stitcher, Google Play, all that fun stuff. Find us somewhere, listen to us, leave comments, 5-star reviews. If you want to leave a 5-star review and rip on Hattery in the comments, that would be awesome. On that note, we're out. Peace.